countrymen and women, allow me to recognize the presence of my Vice Chairman, President Dan Pule, as well as other Alliance presidents that are present here today. I also want to recognize the presence of the former Secretary General for the Patriotic Front, that is Honorable Miller, as well as the member of the Central Committee for the Patriotic Front, Honorable Kafaya, as well as several other dignitaries that are present here today. Countrymen and women, the reason that we called this press briefing is for us to state our position on the judgment that was rendered by the Constitutional Court of Zambia a few days ago, where they declared the TONSE Alliance chairman, who is also the TONSE Alliance 2026 presidential candidate, His Excellency Dr. Edgar LUNGU, the 60th Republican president, and soon to be 8th Republican president.
Yeah.
Countrymen and women, our position on the issue of the judgment of the Constitutional Court is that we do not accept that judgment.
Yes.
The basis for our non-acceptance of the judgment of the Constitutional Court is several, but I'll dwell on one for the time being and for purposes of this press briefing. We have decided to not accept the judgment of the Constitutional Court on the basis that that judgment is illegal. The Constitutional Court had no jurisdiction to review and depart from its previous decision. Countrymen and women, the Constitutional Court is a creature of the Constitution, specifically Article 128 of the Constitution. That is the article that gives birth to the Constitutional Court. And when you look at Article 128, you will realize that nowhere in that article does the Constitution give power to the Constitutional Court to depart from its own decisions. However, the same Constitution, under Article 125, Sub-Article 3, gives power to the Supreme Court of Zambia. The Supreme Court of Zambia is the only court in this country which the Constitution gives power to review its own decisions. And the Constitution specifically says the Supreme Court shall have power to review its own decisions in the interest of jurisprudence. That is, if the Supreme Court sees it fit that a decision that it previously made needs to be reviewed and perhaps departed away from, it has the power through written law. And that written law is by virtue of Article 125, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution. When you move further down in the Constitution, you go to Article 128, which is the article that creates the Constitutional Court. The Constitution is very clear. It gives the Constitutional Court various levels of power. It talks about the Constitutional Court interpreting the Constitution, addressing issues of the contravention or alleged contravention of the Constitution, and various other powers. But the Constitution does not give the Constitutional Court the power to depart from its own decisions. Countrymen and women, if the framers of the Constitution wanted to give the Constitutional Court power to depart from its own Constitution, they would have expressly provided for such a provision in the Constitution.
Correct.
In the same manner and fashion that they provided such a power for the Supreme Court. However, our Constitutional Court, in their judgment, by the way, acknowledged that they do not have power through written law to review and depart from their own decisions. They acknowledged that in their judgment. However, they gave two reasons why they felt they still needed to proceed to review and depart from their previous decision in the issue of the eligibility. The first reason that the Constitutional Court gave in their judgment was that it is premised on precedents from other countries. Specifically, the Constitutional Court cited South Africa and Kenya, where their respective constitutional courts have previously revisited their previous decisions. However, one thing that the Constitutional Court of Zambia omitted to mention in their judgment is the fact that the respective constitutions of South Africa and Kenya grants express power to those courts to review their own decisions. That is the part that the Constitutional Court deliberately omitted from their judgment. So even as the Constitutional Court of South Africa, even as the Constitutional Court of Kenya are able to review and have reviewed and departed from their own decisions, they did so by authority of the written law in their respective constitutions. On the other hand, the Zambian Constitution does not give power to the Constitutional Court to review its own decisions and depart from those decisions. The Constitutional Court of Zambia only provides such a power to the Supreme Court under Article 125, Sub-Article 3 of the Constitution. Countrymen and women, it is on this basis that from an illegality, nothing lawful can come out of an illegality. Yes. It is on that basis that we in the TONSE Alliance have decided to reject the judgment of the Constitutional Court on the basis that it is an illegal judgment. Yes. They have no jurisdiction to review and depart from their own decisions because they are not given authority of any such power by the Constitution of Zambia. Yes. Countrymen and women, the other reason that the Constitutional Court gave, which is the second reason why they decided to depart from their previous decision despite not having an express written law giving them such an authority, was that there was precedence by the Supreme Court. That the Supreme Court, before the 2016 Constitution, which expressly gave power to the Supreme Court to depart and review its own decisions, that prior to that provision, prior to the 2016 Constitution, the Supreme Court in the past was able to review and depart from their own decisions despite the absence of a written provision in the Constitution. Because it is worth noting that the provision which gives power to the Supreme Court to review and depart from their own decisions is provided for in the 2016 Constitution. It was not provided for in the 1991 Constitution. So prior to the 2016 Constitution, the Supreme Court is on record of having reviewed and departed from their previous decisions. So that is the basis that the Constitutional Court used to say even the Supreme Court, before the coming into force of the 2016 Constitution, were able to review and depart from their previous judgments. However, countrymen and women, the fact that the Constitutional Court, or rather the fact that the Supreme Court may have committed an illegality, does not give authority to the ConCourt to commit a similar illegality. The fact that someone broke the law and they were not punished does not give you power to also break the law and argue that you should not be punished. So our submission, countrymen and women, our submission is that both reasons that were advanced by the Constitutional Court as a basis to review and depart from their previous judgment do not carry water. They are baseless. It is a baseless standing to argue that the South African and Kenyan scenario gives the respective courts power to actually review their previous judgments, as well as to use the excuse of the Supreme Court prior to the 2016 prior to the 2016 Constitution. And it is on that basis, countrymen and women, it is on that basis that we have decided to declare the judgment of the Constitutional Court on the eligibility of our TONSE 2026 presidential candidate as null and void. On the basis that it is an unlawful judgment, we are not compelled to adhere to or follow an unlawful judgment. And it is on that basis, countrymen and women, that our 2026 TONSE Alliance presidential candidate remains no other than Dr. Edgar Lungu. Countrymen and women, as I conclude, there was a question or a query that was raised by the chief government spokesperson, Cornelius Mwetwa, as to what our plan B is. I want to categorically mention right here and right now that our plan B is actively in motion. As to what plan B is, because I know that is the elephant in the room. As to what plan B is, our advice to Cornelius is that plan B can only be discussed at presidential level. Therefore, if Cornelius wants to know what plan B is, what he should do is to ask his president to get in touch with our president, and at that level they will discuss plan B. Thank you. At this point, I'll allow the TONSE Alliance Vice Chairman, President Dan Pule, to proceed from here. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Master of Ceremonies, let me acknowledge all the Alliance presidents who are here. I acknowledge the Central Committee members of our anchor party, the PF, who are here, the Secretary, former Secretary General, Mr. Davis Miller is here, Honorable Kafwaya, Madam, and those I may not have seen, but we acknowledge you.
we acknowledge other TONSE leaders like Ambassador Mwape and Chairman for EPP behind us, the Secretary General of NED, and all the distinguished dignitaries who are here. Members of the press, we are grateful that you have come. I want to thank our party, our alliance spokesman for the well-articulated position of the TONSE Alliance and the issues he has raised. Those issues should not be ignored. Therefore, on the basis of what he has mentioned, I had also mentioned this when we were in Kawambwa with His Excellency in the meeting when we watched the judgment. Our position is that it is not over. Mark those words, it is not over. President Edgar LUNGU is eligible to stand for 2026 presidential elections.
Correct.
Just remember the word I've said, the point I've made, it is not over. It is not over. President LUNGU will be on the ballot paper in 2026. And he remains our TONSE Alliance presidential candidate. And we believe that he's going to be our 8th president because he's going to win the presidential elections. Conversely, let's make it clear that President Hakainde is not going to win the 2026 elections. That should be made very clear. The winner is our presidential candidate for 2026. Now, on the question of Plan B, I want to reiterate that we have a Plan B. Seriously, we have a Plan B. That Plan B, as has been mentioned, is in place, and it's a legal one. Okay, just know that. You don't have to share with your adversaries your Plan B. Okay? Otherwise, you weaken your position. We have a clear Plan B as TONSE Alliance regarding the presidential candidacy of our President Edgar LUNGU. That should be very clear. Finally, because we don't want to waste a lot of time, I usually don't like to comment on what my young brother Nevas Mumba says, but I'm compelled to say something today regarding his focus on President LUNGU together with Mr. Winter Kabimba. Some of you have heard. I want to simply say President LUNGU personally has not issued any statement. That doesn't mean he doesn't have anything to say. He has something to say. So for these colleagues of mine, my advice is, gentlemen, you have a lot of work to do. I advise you to go and campaign in Kawambwa, and there you will find the ground. The people would want to hear from you, because Kawambwa can tell you we are going to win as TONSE Alliance. I know there are people who are even wondering in Kawambwa that perhaps some big people shouldn't go there because whatever they say will annoy the Kawambwa people. They might say something that will annoy the Kawambwa people. The Kawambwa people are already annoyed. They want their son, Chilangwa, to be released because it's illegally. It's a political thing. It's a political matter. It's in prison on their behalf. So you are going to see how they are going to vote. So I can assure you, colleagues who are focusing on President LUNGU, like my young brother, Dr. Nevas Mumba, and my friend, Winter Kabimba, to go and campaign there. They might maybe find room to just find out what is happening on the ground. So, ladies and gentlemen, just understand our position is that, as has already been mentioned by my alliance spokesperson, President Sean Tembo, is that we do not accept that judgment. We have a plan B. And we conclude by saying our presidential candidate, President Edgar LUNGU, is still our presidential candidate, and he will be on the ballot paper in 2026. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.